For decades, Canada and the US shared a seamless flow of goods, none more vital than steel. Canadian mills in cities like Hamilton supplied the backbone for American industry, fueling everything from Detroit's cars to New York's skyscrapers. But in early 2025, that partnership fractured. Canada abruptly slashed steel exports to the US, redirecting supply to its own ambitious national projects. The move stunned American manufacturers, who suddenly faced critical shortages and rising uncertainty. For Canadians, it was a bold declaration of economic sovereignty, a pivot to harness their own resources for domestic growth. Prime Minister Mark Carney's government made it clear, Canada would no longer be a passive supplier in an unbalanced relationship. The era of seamless integration was over, a new chapter of strategic independence had begun. The shockwaves were immediate, threatening to reshape North America's economic landscape. The question now, how would both nations adapt to this seismic shift? The roots of Canada's decision lay in a dramatic escalation. President Trump's administration reimposed a 30% tariff on Canadian steel in February 2025. For Canada, this was more than protectionism. It was a breach of trust in a deeply integrated supply chain. Instead of retaliating with tariffs, Ottawa took a more decisive step. It slashed steel exports to the US, absorbing supply for its own use. The message was clear: Canada would not let its industries be held hostage by foreign policy. This move hit American manufacturers hard, exposing their reliance on Canadian steel. At home, Canada seized the opportunity to redirect steel toward national priorities, from infrastructure to green energy. The dispute was no longer about tariffs, it was about control, leverage, and the future of North American trade. Canada's bold countermove signaled a fundamental realignment. The old rules of partnership were gone. Both countries now faced a new uncertain reality. The groundwork for a major economic shift was set. The fallout was swift. U.S. automakers in Michigan and Ohio, long dependent on Canadian steel, faced immediate shortages and production delays. Factories scrambled for alternatives, driving up costs and threatening jobs. Major infrastructure projects stalled as steel prices soared, undermining efforts to rebuild bridges and highways. Even the defense sector felt the pinch. Specialty Canadian steel was suddenly out of reach, complicating procurement for critical military equipment. The tariffs meant to protect American industry now fueled inflation, raising prices for everything from appliances to cars. For consumers, the impact was real higher costs on store shelves and shrinking household budgets. The once invisible world of trade policy became painfully tangible. The U.S. industrial machine built on cross-border cooperation was now exposed to its own vulnerabilities. The steel dispute had become a national issue, touching every corner of American life. The question: could the U.S. adapt before the damage became permanent? North of the border, Canada's steel towns roared back to life. Mills in Hamilton and Sault Ste. Marie ramped up production, fueling a surge in domestic projects. The government launched massive investments in green energy, infrastructure, and defense, using homegrown steel to build a more resilient future. Jobs returned, communities revived, and a new sense of purpose took hold. Canada's strategy was clear: use its resources to drive national growth, not just feed foreign demand. New tariffs and quotas protected the market from cheap imports, ensuring Canadian steelworkers reaped the benefits. The result was a closed-loop economy: Canadian steel for Canadian projects, supporting Canadian jobs. The country was forging not just steel, but a new industrial identity. The message: Canada could thrive by putting its own interests first. In Hamilton, steelworkers like David found renewed hope, steady jobs, bustling mills, and pride in building Canada's future. But in Michigan and Ohio, workers like Maria faced layoffs and anxiety as factories cut shifts and uncertainty grew. The trade dispute's human cost was stark: prosperity for some, hardship for others. The integrated model that once defined North America was under strain. Canada's bold move brought domestic gains but exposed U.S. vulnerabilities and raised costs for families. The challenge now: can both nations find a new balance that respects sovereignty and shared prosperity? This moment is a wake-up call. Old trade models no longer suffice. The future demands resilience, honest dialogue, and a willingness to adapt. The steel dispute is more than a commodity fight. It's a test of North America's ability to reinvent its partnership. For workers and families on both sides, finding a stable path forward is essential.